What's going on, guys? It's Nick here, back in the video. It's Wednesday. It's time to take a look at my favorite trade targets for week 2. Bit of an odd week 1. I'd say mostly the wide receiver position, though. All the other positions, they had their ups and downs, but overall trended towards what you'd sort of expect. Top-end quarterbacks dominated. No random running backs broke out. Tight ends, the ones that overperformed were kind of the ones we had our eyes on, and still, there wasn't any crazy surprises at tight end. But wide receiver, my goodness, there were a ton of duds from players that we know are going to have amazing seasons this year. And because of that, I think you're probably only targeting wide receivers in the trade market this week. There are 13 wide receivers that I have listed on the trade table on my website, and that is probably double what they'll be most weeks. So pretty much every single opponent in your league has a wide receiver on their roster that you could buy low on, meaning it should be a tad easier than normal to find someone that's willing to get a deal done. So if you're confused why you see mostly wide receivers in this video, that is why. We'll go over a tight end, we'll go over 2 running backs, but for the most part, you should just be trying to trade for wide receivers this week. That's where the value is. So we'll start off the top end. All of Ja'Marr Chase, Brian Thomas Jr., Nico Collins, A.J. Brown, and T. Higgins combined for 103 receiving yards, 0 receiving touchdowns in week 1. That is crazy. There are going to be some weeks where you look at those 5 wide receivers and they average more receiving yards than that. The fact that they average less than 21 receiving yards each is mind-blowing. I tweeted this out on, I think it was Tuesday, but last year, only one team in the NFL had more expected fantasy points per game to the wide receiver position than the Bengals. One team. After week 1, only one team had fewer expected fantasy points at the wide receiver position than the Bengals. And if you look at the bottom 2 teams in expected fantasy points at wide receiver, which basically just means volume, it's weighted for red zone volume, right? So a target at the 50-yard line going 5 yards is very different from a target at the 5-yard line going 5 yards, right? There's more value in that target inside the green zone at the goal line. Only the bottom 2 teams, Bengals, Eagles. Every single other team had more expected fantasy points at wide receiver. And look at those 2 teams, Chase, Higgins, Brown, Smith. These are 4 wide receivers who on a lot of teams would be the clear-cut wide receiver 1 on those teams. For those 2 offenses, for them to be the bottom 2 in wide receiver expected fantasy points, basically usage at wide receiver, is crazy. It's the easiest spot in the world to not panic on. Joe Burrow threw 23 pass attempts on Sunday. That is a mark he never hit last season. He was always higher than that. In fact, only 3 times last season did Joe Burrow throw for less than 30 pass attempts. So for whatever reason, the Bengals always start week 1 off slow. They tried to play in the preseason this year, and they're like, maybe that's the reason we got to play in the preseason. Nope, started off slow again. Burrow last year had his worst game in week 1. He was totally fine after that. So if anyone is willing to sell low on Chase or Higgins, I don't think people really are too much, but people lost their matchup, right? If you drafted Chase the 101 and he got you 2 points, you may have lost your matchup because of that. Same thing with T. Higgins. And some people drafted both of them for the correlation there, which was very bad. And it's sometimes why we don't have too heavy correlation when the bad weeks are very bad for that. But yeah, some people will be willing to do that. And if there is a team in your league that went Chase Higgins, I mean, Higgins would be a 3rd round pick, but went, Chase, I don't know, McBride, Higgins, and they're like, oh my goodness, I can't have Chase and Higgins. Realize that. Be like, hey, this was the worst case outcome. It's not going to happen like that every week. But they might be very willing to deal one of the 2 if they took both of them because they lost, because there's no way they won their matchup. So I would accept either one with open arms. Definitely trade for both of them. And at draft cost is totally fine. A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, same thing, but just to a lesser degree. Obviously, I would prefer Ja'Marr Chase to A.J. Brown. I would prefer T. Higgins to Devonta Smith, right? So I'd still prefer, obviously, the Bengals guys. Their reason for doing poorly, though, I think was more injury-related. We talk about this a lot in the summer, but camp injuries are bad. When you miss a week in camp, not the end of the world, but it definitely impacts you. When you miss multiple weeks like A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith did, that's really bad. You're not there for ramp-up periods. You are not there for installs. You are not there for a lot of things. Now, it cooks rookies. It hurts them a lot more. But even for players like A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, if you're missing 3 weeks of like ramp-up, you're missing all this time, they're not going to throw you out there in week 1 for 100% of snaps, 100% of usage. Like they just can't do that, right? Maybe I should have adjusted a little bit more in the week 1 rankings. I still just don't think, like, even if we thought that it was going to take time for A.J. Brown to ramp up, I still don't think there's a world where you ever would have benched him. So maybe we could look back and say that, but I think that's just like, revisionist history. I think it's, easy to look back and say that. But that was the reason, right? It was very obvious when you go back and watch that game. A.J. Brown was out there as a pure decoy. Right, like he was never getting targets. When he was running go routes, he was jogging. Every other route was like super close to the line of scrimmage. They had no plan, no thought in their minds that they were going to use A.J. Brown in that game. Again, we didn't know it would happen to that degree. But when you look back and you say, wow, he just had like one of the worst games of his career because they had no plan to using him. The game plan there was to utilize the running backs, utilize Dallas Goedert, utilize Dotson, play slow, and just win with that in the defense. I think it's possible if we got into like the late fourth quarter and they were losing, right, that they would have gone to Brown, gone to Smith. I think it was more so that they were just like, we can win this game without them. We can use them as decoys, kind of open things up for everyone else. And they were hyperly efficient. It's not like a spot, we'll get to the very end. It's not like a spot a lot of teams go into where like they have this decoy, but like it's still not clicking. And you're like, stop using them as a decoy, just use them as an actual player. They used these two as decoys, and they were hyperly efficient on offense. Now, a little bit less so in the second half, but still, they had a really good game on offense. It's not like the offense was terrible not using these two. So I think that was kind of the reasoning there. I think I would take their week 1 performance with a huge grain of salt. I would expect them to be great this season. It's unfortunate, obviously, if you drafted them early on, but if you didn't draft them, these are still 2 players I would go after in the trade market because they definitely lost people matchups. And whenever a player does that, people are more than willing to cut them loose. But again, huge differentiator here between the Eagles and the Bengals. I would still prefer my wide receivers on the Bengals than the Eagles. But that's also why it'd be much easier to acquire these 2. Also have zero concerns about Nico Collins. He is their clear alpha on that offense. It really was just that the offense couldn't get going at all. They couldn't really do anything. Nico targeted on only 16.7% of his routes, 25% first read percentage. Both, they would have been the lowest last season. So pick any game last season, both of those numbers worse than any of those. There's no way that you should use your sticks. Like, I can promise you that Nico is going to be the primary focus this week. They will go into their camp there and they'll say, okay, go into practice and be like, how do we get more targets than Nico Collins? Because you cannot have him on offense and not be featuring him. And it's a home matchup with the Bucs. We know every single year exactly how to attack the Bucs. They have an unbelievable run defense. They really try to sell out and stop the run, but they're very weak towards the pass. So teams typically still try to run the ball early on, but they realize they can't do it. And I can promise you the Texans are not going to be able to behind that offensive line with Nick Chubb leading the way. They're not going to be efficient in any way on the ground. So they'll try it, they'll fail, and they'll lean more pass heavy. And when that happens, Nico Collins is going to have a good game this week. So I would trade for him before he has that really good game. I also think it's going to help these other wide receivers. So obviously they have 2 rookie wide receivers that are good. We still don't know exactly how good they're going to be, but 2 rookies that are going to start getting ramped up. Christian Kirk's going to get healthy soon. And you could view that as a negative and be like, oh, that's more competition. But I could also say, okay, like this week, it was mostly Nico running routes next to Xavier Hutchinson and Justin Watson. Do you think the Rams were that scared of Xavier Hutchinson and Justin Watson when they also knew the run game was pathetic? No, they had no concerns about those guys. So it was very easy to sell out and stop Nico. When you add Christian Kirk, when you have these rookies performing better, it's going to make it so the defense is like, okay, we can't completely sell out to stop Nico Collins because these other players are still very talented. It also helps if the offense just doesn't look terrible. If they get going, they stay on the field more. They get into the red zone more. Well, Nico Collins is a featured weapon in the red zone. So I think much better days are coming from Nico Collins. I would not be concerned. I would trade for him. Another elite wide receiver I'm mostly not worried about, is Brian Thomas Jr. I just say mostly because part of why I was somewhat concerned this summer and why I included him last in that first tier of wide receivers came true in week 1. Travis Hunter is an absolute freak, and he's going to command an elite target share. That's what we talked about this summer, being like, okay, if we are wrong on Brian Thomas Jr. being the clear alpha on this team, it is because Travis Hunter, who is an incredible athlete, an incredible wide receiver, someone they clearly want to scheme usage to, just gets the ball so much that it prevents Brian Thomas Jr. from having that like first round value in fantasy. And let's be honest, Travis Hunter was like 2 inches away from Monster Day on Sunday. That interception that was thrown to Travis Hunter, if that ball is a couple inches further, Travis Hunter catches a minimum of a 50-yard reception, but maybe like a 70-yard touchdown. And if you add that to the end of his day, then people would be much more concerned about Brian Thomas Jr. They'd be much more excited about Travis Hunter. So I can see this going both ways. And again, it's why I'm a little bit more concerned. You look at the stat line for Travis Hunter and you're like, oh, he didn't do that much. No, I mean, they were scheming usage to him. He was getting open. He was open for that touchdown deep downfield. It just was a little bit short. So the narrative could have shifted very easily. But I still think as the season goes on, not only is this team going to click a little bit more in this new system, not only is Travis Hunter going to develop as a player and take coverage away from Brian Thomas Jr. at times, but teams are going to push them, right? Like the Panthers were awful. They were so bad. Like they had 3 points at halftime. I think they may have had 3 points going into the fourth quarter. They didn't have to be aggressive. Trevor Lawrence only needed to throw the ball 12 times in the second half of the game, and he didn't have to be overly aggressive on those pass attempts. I don't think he attempted a pass with less than 7 minutes and 55 seconds. I think that was the last pass attempt, was 7:55 in the fourth. They didn't need him in the second half. There are going to be weeks, plenty, where the Jaguars either lose or are trailing in the fourth quarter. And when that happens and we really get these 9, 10, 11 target games for Brian Thomas Jr., he's a player we want. He gets the downfield usage, the midfield usage. He's extremely talented. He is someone who can command a 28, 29, 30% target share alongside a 25% target share from Travis Hunter. So even if we get into the world where Travis Hunter is taking that 25%, which I think he's going to have this season, Brian Thomas Jr.'s targets are worth a lot. It didn't hit this week, but he's not going to catch 1 of 7 targets most weeks. We saw him get a schemed carry in the red zone. He's still someone going to get featured plenty, so I'm not worried that much. And I do think for both the Jaguars and the Bengals, who they play this week, this could be the last time. Jamar Chase and T. Higgins could both have 150 yards and a touchdown this week. We could see Travis Hunter and Brian Thomas Jr. both have over 100 yards and a score this week. That game could really get going. It's not a guarantee. No game is a guarantee to get going. I think the total is only 48.5. But if the Jaguars pull off to a 10-0 lead early on, this game is going nuclear. And if that happens, you'll just never, at any point of the season, ever be able to get those 4 wide receivers. So I'd put out feelers and honestly throw Travis Hunter into that mix, because again, he could have had 7 for 100 and a touchdown if that ball was thrown just a couple inches further. He's awesome. I want him. But Brian Thomas Jr. is probably the better one to go after, because he is a first-round value, a first-round talent. And I don't know, maybe you can get him for third-round value right now. I could talk on for days about the wide receivers you could trade for right now, but I think you get the picture. If a stud wide receiver did nothing in week 1, I cannot think of a wide receiver that I'm actually concerned about their usage, concerned about their volume this season early on. So if you see one that had a bad stat line and someone's willing to trade for them or trade them away, do it. This works for Pickens, for Neighbors, for Amon-Ra St. Brown, for Ridley. They all fit into that category. If someone is trying to sell high on Tet after 1 week, capitalize on that, because Tet is going to have an awesome rookie season. But yeah, just trade for wide receivers this week. I honestly, you could stop the video now. Don't, because I'd like you to watch the rest of it. And we're going to go over Ken Walker, which I think a lot of you want me to go over. But trade for wide receivers. Don't trade for anything else this week. If you are looking for running back, the 2 that I want to talk about at least are Hampton and Ken Walker, because they definitely both I'll say quote unquote underperformed for Hampton. We'll talk about why he didn't really, but definitely Ken Walker underperformed. But those would be the two I'd be looking at, right? So with Hampton, I think people mostly know they shouldn't be worried, but some people may have drafted him, at that turn. If you drafted him at the turn and you went like Jamar Chase and Hampton, you probably didn't win in week 1. So those people are frustrated. But he was one of the more featured running backs in week 1. And that's really all you can ask for a rookie running back in week 1 playing the Chiefs to be one of the most featured running backs in the NFL. It's an awful spot whenever you're playing Kansas City. Not only did they have a great run defense, but offensive coordinators know you can't win by running the ball, and you can't play it safe in the second half. Even if you get up by 10 points, even if you get up by 15, 16 points in the late fourth quarter against Kansas City, you cannot run the ball. You have to keep your foot on the gas because everyone knows Kansas City can score 16 points in 2 minutes. That can absolutely happen. Whereas if you're playing the Panthers, just run the ball. They're not going to catch up. It's going to be fine. The Chargers looked great in week 1. They'll look even better once they have Trey Harris, Keandre Lambert-Smith fully good to go. Obviously, those were 2 rookie wide receivers. Didn't have much of a role in week 1, but they're great talents that are going to command more usage and just make the offense more efficient once they're getting going. They're implementing the game plan a little bit more often. Hampton, sure, he could lose a couple more touches to Najee on a week-to-week basis, but more so, the backfield's just going to get more touches, right? It was still, 81% of the snaps for Hampton. He had 15 of the 16 running back carries, 25 of the team's 32 running back routes. So he was one of the more featured running backs in the NFL. And it wasn't a game. There are going to be plenty of games where the Chargers running backs get well north of 20 total carries. So it's totally fine if Najee mixes in for a couple more because most weeks the running backs are going to be used more than this week's. It's just that they were playing Kansas City. There's going to be more touches for this offense. There's going to be red zone usage for these running backs. So there's going to be more production. I'm not worried. If someone wants to panic sell, I would 100% still trade for him at the value he's drafted at. So 3rd round value, I'm totally fine giving up for Omarion Hampton. Unfortunately, the value may have changed a little bit for Ken Walker. I say may because I really just don't know yet. And that's one big thing we need to remember. And it's why I don't make rest of season rankings for week 2. We start that in week 3 because everyone overreacts to 1 week, right? We have 1 week of data. So when we look back at the end of the season, when we have 17 games of data from these guys, we know right now 1/17th of what we will know in week 17. Now, by week 8, 9, 10, we pretty much know what to expect, but certainly after 1 week, we do not know. He's another player that missed time in camp. He missed a lot of time in camp. I think it was 3 weeks he missed. So there's definitely a chance that his role was more limited than expected because he has not been fully ramped up yet. It was also strange to me that they didn't run a ton of outside zone. That was the talk of the summer, right? Was that this offense is shifting more towards outside zone. That's what the offense will be built around. That's why we like Ken Walker because he is the best running back on this team at outside zone. And Mike McDonald was asked why he didn't run very much outside zone in the first week. And he said, quote, "I probably don't want to discuss our strategy here, but I'll say this. When we ran it, I thought it was effective. That's who we are. We're an outside zone team with inside zone gap complements. That's what we're going to be." I don't know. It's so strange because you talk about doing this all summer. You go out there in week 1 and you don't do it very much, but you say that when you did do it, it worked. Okay. Again, go back to the Eagles, right? With the Eagles giving, these decoy routes to AJ Brown and Devonta Smith, right? You'd be more questioning it if it didn't work. If they went out there and they scored 10 points and you're like, why are you using your best players as a decoy when you scored 10 points? Why are you not running outside zone and saying it worked when you did? You scored 13 points and the offense looked terrible most of the week. If you were actually an outside zone team and it was actually effective, use it. Run it more. And maybe there's something here. Maybe it truly is. Charbonnet's not that good at outside zone. They wanted to use Charbonnet more because of Ken Walker's foot ramping up from that. And so that's why they didn't use it much. I don't know. I don't know the answer here. Again, that's why it's only been 1 week. Maybe we'll see that going forward. It was just strange to me. The offense looked so bad. I mean, so bad for most of the week to then say, yeah, it was good when we used it. We just didn't feel like it, and we're not going to tell you about the game plan. I don't know. It was very strange to me. I don't 100% know what to make of it right now. Charbonnet played 18% more snaps. I think it was 58% to 40% for Charbonnet. He got 2 more carries, while Ken Walker technically got the 3 design targets, which was great to see. He was getting the screen passes. He was getting more in the passing game usage. And he had, I believe it was 3 targets on only 9 routes. So very high targets per route run there. Charbonnet was the one they used in 2-minute drill, and he did have 1 more route. He didn't command any targets on his routes. So I guess that's a positive for Ken Walker. But you could also say that was randomness as well. Like, what if Charbonnet in the 2-minute drill had just caught some dump offs? I don't know. So we'll see. I'll go over these situations a little bit more in the rankings video. We'll kind of see how things play out for another week. I only bring him up because people are beside themselves about Ken Walker. I can promise you it's not going to take draft day value to get Ken Walker. You can get him for absolutely nothing right now, and that's pretty rare to say after 1 week. There's absolutely a chance that Ken Walker goes out there this week, has 13, 14 carries, 60 yards and a touchdown, a couple receptions, and people who are trading him away are like, whoops, I probably shouldn't have done that, right? Now, there's also a chance that this is just a split. Again, we do not know. It was very concerning seeing the split. It was very weird seeing how bad the offense was. I would love to see them go out there for a second week, look better before trading for him. But also, obviously, if he looks better, you're not going to be able to trade for him that much. So for me, I would say if you didn't get him, you want to take that shot, bench player. I wouldn't be trading a starter for him. Maybe if it's like 2 bench players, a bench running back, maybe they have a handcuff running back they really want, so you do a handcuff and a solid rotational flex player, something like that. I'd try and 2-for-1 for him. But I would, if they're not willing to do that, honestly hold off, say, okay, let's just see if he plays bad again this week. I think it's at Steelers, so another not that great matchup. Plays bad again, then maybe he's even easier to go after. So maybe that's the way to play it. Maybe the way to play it is just say, send a super low ball offer this week. If it doesn't hit, fine. See if he does terrible in another week, and then you can even send probably lower than that offer. Only other player I want to go over here is Colston Loveland. A lot of people are going to drop Loveland this week. I can promise you, I think that's a big mistake. I understand it when you have a shallow bench and you're like, Nick, I have 5 bench spots. I can't afford to roster 2 tight ends, and I can't afford to play him these couple weeks. I think that's a scenario where it is okay, especially in shallower leagues, to dump him and to not have him. So totally fine if you end up doing that. But it's pretty common for not only rookies for the whole season to not be that amazing, but week 1, I mean, it's not that uncommon for a good rookie to post a dud in week 1, especially when they're taking on a top 3 defense, right? We're going to be fading Minnesota pretty much every single week. That's a great defense. It's not shocking that he didn't do great. Also, Caleb missed him a couple times. He was open in the middle of the field. If even one of those hits for a 20-yard gain, you're looking a little bit different at his production. Obviously, he didn't have a full snap share, but he only ran 10 fewer routes than Cole Kmet. I would be willing to bet everything that I own that split is going to shrink over time, and that eventually Colston Loveland will overtake Cole Kmet and be running more routes than him. My current expectation on kind of a timeline for Kmet is that you're probably not starting him for the next couple of weeks. We'll see. It'd be really fun if Ben Johnson goes to play Detroit and balls out. I hope that he's saving some awesome plays, trick plays, just goes fully all out in week 2 at Detroit. I think it would just be fun if the Bears really excelled in that game. So maybe that'll be a spot Loveland gets more usage. But I would say the likely outcome is here, the Bears have a bye in week 5. We always see the post-bye rookie bump. Typically, it's more common in the second half of the season. But I think from week 6 on, Colston Loveland is a tight end 1. So for those of you with 7 bench spots, for those of you in deeper formats, there is absolutely a chance that the person who drafted Loveland sees that first week, is like, oh my goodness, I don't even want him on my team. And you send pretty much nothing. You send a low-end bench player and they're like, well, I was actually thinking about dropping them anyways. That's a player that I would have added for him off free agency. And you do it if you have especially like a mediocre option at tight end, but that can just get you by, right? A Hunter Henry, a Brenton Strange, a Fannin maybe, honestly. Just someone okay that can get you by the next couple of weeks. I think from week 6 on, Loveland is going to be awesome, going to be a tight end 1, going to be someone we're trusting every single week. So if you can afford to roster him on the bench and it doesn't really hurt you that much, I would definitely do it. So whether he's on free agency, whether he's available in trades, I wouldn't trade a lot, but trade something low end on your bench that you don't really need right now. I think that's a great move. Again, I think he's going to be awesome in the second half of the season, especially week 6 on. I think you're starting him every week. So those are players that I would be trading for this week. Again, mostly wide receivers because so many busted in week 1. So for the most part, I'd only be going after them. But if you want to trade for some running backs, want to trade for a tight end, those are the options I'd be looking at. I'll be back tomorrow afternoon to go over the week 2 rankings. So make sure you're subscribed. Make sure you click the bell icon next to subscribe so it actually shows up for you and so you don't miss out on that one. But that'll do it for this one. Thank you all for watching, and I'll catch you all on the video tomorrow.